Thanks, Chair, and I'm glad of the opportunity to speak on this debate, which is very important for every region of the country, not alone Dublin or Cork, but the Shannon and the Midwest region from which I represent myself in Limerick. I think at the outset there's been a lot of dishonesty on the government's part in terms of the presentation of the case to dispose of the 25.1% shareholding. And it keeps getting thrown at this side of the House that we dispose of 75% of the company, which is true. And I think quite rightly we keep pointing out that in disposing of 75% of the shareholding of the company, we now have a very successful company which is in a very strong position and has grown and gone from strength to strength following that privatisation. It allowed the company to decouple itself from absolute political interference in the day-to-day running of the company. It allowed the company to restructure itself and sell itself and market itself and grow its market share, which we have seen that it has done exponentially over the last number of years. So that decision, which Fine Gael and the Labour Party in opposition rejected roundly and called us out on, has now been shown to be a success. So it's now okay to dispose of 100% of the company when it wasn't okay to dispose of 75% of the company. And therein is the hypocrisy in the position that you've been offering by way of justification over the last number of days. And I think it's very ironic that we have the trade union movement, almost unanimous to a man and to a woman right across it, out in opposition in relation to this proposed deal with IAG. And I also thought it was ironic yesterday that in support of the government announcement, which was made without any reference to this chamber, only by way of this sham statements that we're having today, rather than having a proper Dáil debate, where we haven't had the documentation furnished to us as members of the Oireachtas to give ourselves the detail and to read ourselves into the minutiae of the deal. We're only debating here based on what we're hearing on the news airwaves and in the newspapers. But the airport companies were being cited as being out in support of this. The state-owned airport companies, the people who work for the government, the boards of the airports who were appointed by the government, all these people have vested interests in the government. They're an extension of the government. So why wouldn't they? They're compromised in terms of being critical to this debate, if you ask me. You know, they can't come to it from an objective point of view. So from that point of view, I just think the whole management of the news cycle and the media management of it, I think, has been cynical, and I think that the public will see through that. I don't believe that a merger or a sale of the shareholding in Aer Lingus to IAG and the subsuming of Aer Lingus into the IAG group is the only show in town. It has been shown that Aer Lingus has been successful in terms of restructuring itself. And if you look at other airlines, for example, if you look at EasyJet, if you look at Ryanair, how they have grown, and they are similar in size. Ryanair has grown from a passenger base of 11 million in the year 2000 to over 100 million to date, and EasyJet is carrying 60 million passengers. So they have shown and demonstrated how they can do it on their own by not having to opt in to being part of a larger group. In relation to the valuation of the company, I think critical questions need to be answered, and this issue needs to be highlighted. The 24 Heathrow landing slots have been valued at around 400 million. And Padraig O'Cada, the former Aer Arann CEO, who Deputy Cleary referred to, has stated that with a share price of around €3, the company would be valued at 1.7 billion. So at a price that we're getting in around 340 million, there's a discount in that. There's a discount there, and nobody has addressed why that discount is being factored into the offer that you're potentially going to accept. And I think the takeover deal is really anti-competitive, because being anti-competitive, if you have a trend and a drift in terms of consolidation and the centralisation of the service provision of passengers and airline industry into a small number of carriers, like you have in North America, where I think it's up to 4 carriers are carrying nearly 80% of the traffic. You have monopoly-type situations. So that is not good. Now, in relation to connectivity and regional connectivity, we have a situation in this country where we've got a two-tier recovery afoot. We have Dublin and the East Coast, and then we have the regions. And there is no doubt that this will impact ultimately on the region's competitiveness and indeed connectivity. And I'll tell you why, because we had a situation in Limerick back in 2007, and many of you will remember it, when the Shannon Heathrow slot was taken temporarily from Shannon up to Belfast. There was a huge campaign locally. And it's ironic now that the people who are in this chamber and beyond from this chamber who campaigned and called out the government at the time, rightly so, to have that slot reinstated and to have the connectivity reinstated. They're very mute now, and I wonder why. Why are those people who took a position of strength in opposition, why aren't hearing from them now? Because connectivity to the Limerick region and to the Midwest region is essential, and we don't have guarantees. You will say to us, Minister, that you have guarantees, but how are those guarantees to be called into effect after the term expires? That's a big known unknown into the future, which I think is a worry for the region. And what if, for example, the guarantees are reneged on and there is recourse to the courts? We will have a situation of restoration, but the restoration or the penalty could be financial, and in most instances will be financial, and it won't be restorative. The connectivity mightn't be restored. So you're then leaving Limerick and the Midwest region at a disadvantage. So I don't accept, and I'm sorry to say this, I don't accept the guarantees that you're giving, that you're saying that they're cast iron. We've had the narrative right throughout the debate that these the guarantees around connectivity will be cast iron, they'll be legally enforceable. What if Qatar Air comes in, as has been widely reported, and start conducting a takeover of IAG, if they ultimately take over IAG, or if IAG decide to sell out to them? Like we've seen the situation in Limerick, and again it's under your stewardship, Minister, where the M20 motorway to Cork has been shelved. And that's an issue which I took you to task on, and I take you to task on again. We are at a disadvantage in Limerick in terms of being a region. This deal with Aer Lingus will ultimately enhance the anti-regional, the agenda which inhibits against balanced regional development by the government. We've seen it in terms of the road network, I say to you, the M20, and with Shannon now ultimately looking at a situation where the government will not have say at board level in concert with another small shareholding which can be pulled together either through the pilots or by other shareholders to direct the situation in relation to the slots and the use of the slots, is putting us at a huge disadvantage. So what I would say to you ultimately, Minister, is this. I think it's a bad deal. I think the situation out there, which has been demonstrated by Ryanair and by EasyJet, goes to the heart of it. Aer Lingus can survive on its own. It is surviving on its own. It's flourishing on its own. It's been a success for this country. It has demonstrated that. And it can go from strength to strength. It can go further. And I think what we've also heard this morning in relation to the NIRAS report is very, very worrying. This report, which was commissioned by the boards jointly of Aer Lingus and IAG, and which was only to be seen by the boards. And thankfully somebody leaked that report and we now have the benefit of it. I think it's hugely disturbing. And particularly when we hear that the Aer Lingus board, that was offered as part of the debate also, that the Aer Lingus board are recommending this deal. Of course they're recommending the deal, because the board members stand to benefit financially, which is a fact, by lots of money. Don't have the exact figure, but it's a couple of million, isn't it? The individual board members. They stand to gain a lot out of this. So of course they're going to recommend it. But the fact that the costs are 40% higher, and the report identifies job cuts in the following areas of ground handling, 20%, catering, 40%, maintenance, 15%, and heavy maintenance to Eastern Europe. So there will be job cuts. There will be job losses. And IAG has said nothing to us about the creation of new jobs. There was 500 jobs being mentioned, but they're on the way because of the increase in the transatlantic routes in any event. So there will be job losses, unfortunately, and I think any of the of the presentation that you've made hasn't dealt with that. Finally, I just want to make one last point, Chair, is in relation to the pensioners. I think the fact that there is nothing in the deal for the Aer Lingus pensioners is a sad indictment of the situation.
Thank you.
Is a sad indictment. We all know the situation that they've undergone in terms of their pension fund and the deficit that their pension fund faces. And you've said that you've created a connectivity fund, but there is nothing going into the pension fund of the very men and women who built up Aer Lingus to what it is today.
Thank you very much.
And I think that is something which you need to revisit. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy.